intention on this amendment to allow us to make sure it's perfectly clear. It's the same one as a portion of Senator Pittman's, that if a person is parked on the roadway, legally, lawfully parked on the roadway, while they're picking up kids from school, they can use their cell phone while they're parked there waiting for kids. It was stated by the proponents that it wasn't their intention to do that, and so we're just putting it in there to make it perfectly clear. I'd move my amendment. Do we have a second? Seconded by Senator Hawk. Further discussion? Senator Hawk.
I wanted to compliment you as chairman, because I think having the kind of open discussion that we had about this bill and allowing lots of the questions, I think the AAA that presented this bill did a lot of good work, but I think as we discussed it, we saw some things that needed to be clarified, and it just makes me feel really good about our work in the committee process. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Lawrence, do you have the copies of those, the definition of parked and standing vehicles, or? To add to the discussion on this, I got these two statutes. I believe it was an email that I was copied on from Ed Klump that had these statutes, looked them up. I printed them off in large font so I can read them in case I didn't bring my glasses. But it helps you clarify when you read what a parked vehicle is, you know, the standing. And so I thought that might help for people to understand exactly what parked is. Further questions or discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Amendment is adopted. Back on the bill. Are there further amendments? Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill? Senator Hawk.
Mr. Chairman, I move we pass out Senate Bill 25 as amended favorably for passage.
Is there a second? Seconded by Senator Cluse. Further discussion on the bill? All those in favor of moving this to the floor favorable for passage signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Committee, thank you for that. Next order of business we have a presentation via WebEx with Jill Shelley. And Andrew, could you make Jill Shelley on the large focus of the screen for a presentation? Thank you, Jill. I think when you start speaking, it's going to come to you.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I was asked what processes or criteria other states use in designating highways in honor of or in memory of certain people, and how various states determine which license plates to authorize. I did that work last summer and in the early fall, and you have before you those two memoranda today. These are also available on the Kansas Legislative Research website on the policy page for transportation. If it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, I'll talk first about designating transportation facilities, meaning highways and bridges. That's the memorandum with the multicolored map on the first page. Okay. This memo is accompanied by a listing on gold-colored paper of the current designations in Kansas. The listing was current as of noon yesterday, but it doesn't include one that was approved for introduction in House Transportation yesterday afternoon. On this spreadsheet, regular type means the designation has something to do with military service, and italics mean the designation does not have to do with military service by the individual or group honored. I grouped the states into general categories of having more than 20 such designations or fewer than 20. The map on the first page shows you, among other things, that only 10 states have designated more than 20 transportation assets and have standards in their statutes and regulations. Those are the states in red. I found standards also in Illinois and Nebraska, but it isn't clear how many designations they have because they're among the states that designate transportation assets by means other than statutes and regulations. And designations and documents such as concurrent regulations are really time-consuming and hard to find. So the remainder of the memorandum really discusses the policy choices made by only 12 states. The biggest category you'll see on the map, the 19 states in dark blue, the states for which I found fewer than 20 designations and no standards in statutes or regulations. Kansas is in the next biggest category with 16 other states, those that have more than 20 designations, but no standards in statutes or regulations. The next part of this memo describes the policy decisions states have made. Something common to the two memoranda today is that they provide policy options, not answers. For neither topic is there consensus among states, nor standard language or best practices. Page 2 of this one shows you which states put their standards for designation in statutes, which put them into policy documents, and the two that put them into regulations. The bullets in the second set on page 2 list the 7 states in which the legislature makes the final decision, and how the legislature approves, meaning using statute or resolution, and the 6 states in which the agency decides. Texas is in both categories because it has different ones for whether the designation is made specifically by the legislature or whether it's requested by a local government. And in Nebraska, the governor has the final word. So on to policy decisions. One commonality in the standards had to do with requiring the person to be honored this way to have made significant contributions to the state or locality. Page 3 provides language the states have used. Oklahoma's is an example of language that is pretty broad, and Nebraska's standard appears to be very restrictive, requiring the honoree to have contributed to the betterment of the state and giving extra consideration to those who added to the, quote, welfare of society, unquote. The question I've been asked and why the information is on the listing of Kansas designations on the gold sheets is whether the honoree must have died before being so honored. The states for which I found such restrictions are on the bottom of page 3 and the top of page 4. In those 8 states, it ranges from deceased to having been deceased for 5 years. In Mississippi, if the honoree was honored and had been a legislator or another state official, the honoree must have been out of public office for 10 years. States also required evidence of community support for a designation, as detailed on the bottom of page 4 and the top of page 5. Evidence of that support could be a petition or resolution from a local government, for example. Also on page 5, you'll find information about other policy choices of 2 or more states, such as on public notice and on offensive words that on the highway designations. And my sources are on page 6. Mr. Chairman, would you like to take questions about this one now or go on to the second memo?
Questions now? Questions on the highway naming? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you said this, and I might have missed it. Do any of the states have some sort of agency that may screen applications for highway designation and look at criteria before it comes to the legislature?
Yes, they do. Trying to find that. It's a little more, not as clear on this one, but especially on license plates, you're going to see that. But there is definitely some screening going on.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I believe there's some listings on page 5 of the deal where some of them require a certain number of signatures or local community support at the top on some of those. You'll carry on with license plates.
All right. That's the state it's not showing up on my camera, sorry. State authorization for fundraising license plates. This is restricted to license plates issued to raise awareness of various issues and those issues to help organizations raise money. Categories I'm going to call like fundraising plates for purposes of this presentation. It does not address, for example, the huge category of license plates issued to honor military veterans for their service. In Kansas, 15 of the 44 special license plates are in the military category. The listing on Mylock covered paper provides information on all of the special license plates in Kansas currently and those proposed so far this year. On this one, italics and the listings at the end indicate 2021 bills. Again, this memorandum provides policy choices. There is not consensus among the states on these criteria, and they vary widely. The first of those policy choices is whether the legislature or an agency has the last word about whether a fundraising license plate is approved. The map showing that particular policy choice is on the second page. And the numbers are in bullets just above the map. On the map, blue indicates the legislature decide. Green indicates the agency decides. Small horizontal lines indicate the requirements are in statutes. Checkerboard fill indicates requirements are in both statutes and regulations. And vertical line means requirements are only in regulations. If you want the score, it's 12 for the legislature deciding and 12 for the agency decision. You may notice also on that map for Alaska, New Hampshire, and Wyoming, we didn't find any information about fundraising license plates in those states. So while it appears that the legislature or the agency are exclusive categories, some states require either agency input if it's a legislative decision or legislative input if it's an agency decision. Get to your question, Senator Hawk. On page 3, you'll see information on that, such as Colorado requires an applicant organization to get agency approval before the organization gets legislative approval. And in South Carolina, organization denied by the agency can appeal to the legislature. A few states limit the total number of fundraising license plates in circulation at any one time, such as 150 for Indiana and 20 in Michigan. You may be wondering how many plates the states have approved. I tried. I couldn't get those definite numbers, but compared to many states, Kansas does not have all that many. I'm not sure how many of the plates NCSL has listed as specialty plates would be particularly considered fundraising or awareness plates, but a listing it has posted from a couple of years ago gives numbers of more than 200 plates in 8 states. Georgia, Maryland, Montana, New York, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Virginia. In all, 34 states specify some criteria. Pages 4 through 10 of the memo describe criteria for approval of fundraising plates that were found in state statutes and regulations and in 2 other documents. The sources of that information are listed on the last few pages of the memo, and I'll describe a few of those public policy choices. The category that was most common is that the organization seeking the plate must have must have nonprofit status and a finding the organization contributes to the public good. Some states require documentation of nonprofit status, such as proof of 501c3 status or submitting copies of organization documents. The states define public good in various ways, as you can read on page 5. Among those is providing the community with special programs to improve health, education, or general welfare, which is the language from Hawaii, and there's similar language in Pennsylvania and South Dakota. States listed starting at the bottom of page 5 require proof that the money was spent for the intended purposes, and in some states, the money can be spent only in the state that approved the plate. A few states require an organization to submit results of an audit. A total of 34 states have requirements on these plates, and starting on the bottom of page 6, the memorandum provides information on the 24 of them with requirements that restrict names, messaging, or combinations. On pages 7 and 8, you'll see the language states have used to specify the plates must not be used to further commercial enterprise, such as by prohibiting the use of any logos or words linked to specific products. Wisconsin allows a person to object to an organization if the organization is for profit, for example. Another big category of no-no is obscenity or content that's objectionable by reason of being vulgar or including profanity, having sexual connotation, or being for an organization that is discriminatory in its purpose, nature, activity, or name. Some states say a license plate design cannot promote any religion or anti-religious sentiment, and you can see excerpts of that language on the bottom of page 5. Political organizations are off the table in a few states. Another group of organizations that some states explicitly exclude are those that discriminate based on race, sex, national origin, or other basis in state civil rights laws, or the plate's message would express prejudice. Language from those states is summarized on the bottom of page 10. Page 11, the last one before listing of sources, shows you a few more prohibitions on messaging and organization I found in the statutes and regulation. And with that, I'd be happy to try to answer questions.
Committee questions. Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Jill. This is really, really good stuff. I want to point the committee's attention to this gold sheet that she handed out, just so you're aware of it. It took me a minute to digest it. It's a spreadsheet that has all of our highways or bridges or intersections that have been named. And you'll notice 1951 to the year 2000. On the first 2 pages, more or less, it's sorted a little bit differently, but you'll notice that in the last 2 decades, there's a huge push to have a lot of different names, like I'd say 5 to 1 in terms of the last 2 decades versus the previous 5 decades. And it's something to be aware of. I mean, I think what we found on this committee is that we have a lot of these requests, and I think this is timely. We don't have any standards, and there's been a big push to do these types of things. And so it's, I think it's good for this committee to think about putting some standards in place, perhaps.
Senator Pyle.
Mr. Chairman. Jill, of the states that limit the number of license plates, excuse me, what's the lowest number of limit that's limited to?
I believe it was 20.
20?
I think that's right.
Does Kansas have 20?
Kansas has 44 right now, I think.
All right. Chairman, maybe it's time we put a pay-go in on license plates. If you want to put a new one out there, you got to get through one. That's a lot of license. That's more than I thought we had. Thank you, Jill.
Jill, what was the maximum number in the state? Over 200, wasn't it?
Texas has more than 400, but they have provisions where a local organization can request one, and it's up to somebody else to have to say no to that organization. So it's a presumed yes. They also have print-on-demand plates. So there's been kind of an explosion in recent years.
Okay, thank you. Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I read this quickly. Are there some states, or did I read about one that maybe limited them to 5 a year or had some kind of a limit?
Yeah.
And I want to be clear, we don't really have any limitations on fundraising license plates. Is that correct?
Not in statutes and regulations, no, but the plate has to clear legislative approval.
Could you say that again? The plate has to clear what kind of approval?
It has to be approved by the legislature. So you all are doing screenings, and it's not formalized.
Does not the license plate division of the Department of Motor Vehicles have sort of a tacit approval about the design of the plate?
Yes, it does.
They don't just agree to whatever any person or organization says they want their plate to look like. They sort of
Right.
give them some, at least artistic guidance. Is that not correct?
That is correct.
And we don't have anything that has any standard about obscenity or something that might be perceived of it as offensive, but it seems like a lot of states do have. Did you sort of garner that?
Yes, that was a popular category, offensive on a number of ways, but uh, I can't think of any that have been proposed in Kansas that would be anywhere close to that to date.
And of course, then you get the dilemma of how do you define that? Is it in the eye of the beholder? So anyway, sure want to go down that path, but don't want to, but anyway. It seems like we're, not to ask you this, but Mr. Chairman, it seems like we potentially could get into some difficulty in the future. And we might have the good sense not to do something, but we might inadvertently, without having any standard or criteria, wind up approving something that we don't detect as a problem. And I'm not sure what process we would use if we happen to approve a license plate, or for that matter, a section of highway, and then we found out that it was offensive in some way or something that we wouldn't agree to today, but we somehow agreed to it a year ago or 5 years before. I don't know what process we might use. I suppose a bill, we could do that. But kind of an interesting question. I think we've been lucky.
I do believe that revenue does have some standards on offensive plates. They do. I know they restrict several things on personalized license plates. So whenever we get revenue here, we tried to have them. It was closed both times. We tried to have, but due to storms, we tried to get them here this year for a presentation, and they closed the Capitol due to threats. So we're going to try and schedule them again after turnaround, and maybe we'll get revenue here. Anybody has a day off they need, we'll looking for dates after turnaround. Thank you, Jill. Appreciate all your work. A lot of good information there. Stuff that I know several members of the committee have been looking forward to look over. Might be some bills come out of that, but do appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now turn our attention to Senate Bill 68. Adam, do you want to give us a briefing?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 68 would provide for, the fee on the firefighter distinctive license plate, the current plate that exists in statute, the firefighter plate, currently does not have a royalty fee associated with it. The bill would create an annual $10 firefighter training fee for anyone applying for that plate or currently has the plate. It would be an annual $10 fee that would go along with the registration and the current fees that go on yearly. Again, these fees would be deposited into a new fund, essentially controlled by the expenditures would be controlled by the Kansas State Firefighters Association for certain purposes dealing with honoring firefighters, training firefighters, and any general use that supports firefighters. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
First question, Adam. This bill would be fine if we happen to decide to put the contents of Senate Bill 69 into this, so we only had one bill going to the floor on license plates?
Yeah, there'd be no issue with two subjects there.
Thank you. Committee, any further questions for Adam on the license plate? Committee, what's your pleasure on Senate Bill 68? Senator Pittman.
I move that we pass this out favorably, Senate Bill 68.
Is there a second? Seeing no, Dennis seconds. Senator Piles, the birthday man. Anyway, On this, I was wondering if the committee might consider for the further discussion, the possibility of inserting the contents of Senate Bill 69 into Senate Bill 68 to put one on the floor. Senator Pyle.
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe Jill said we're at 43 plates. So if we do this, we'd be at 45. Would the chairman consider putting an amendment on here to cap it at 45?
Any amendments are germane, but I personally, I probably would not consider that a friendly amendment, as these have been used by several folks to raise money.
Just saying, at some point we need to, I wish Senator Imler were here. Anyway,
Senator Hawk.
I like us being efficient with bills. And not to necessarily discuss 69 in depth, but one of the problems I have, and this looks like a fine organization trying to help particularly kids with cancer, but one of the difficulties I have is there's sort of an implied endorsement when we say there's a license plate, and if it's used for fundraising, I think the public sort of assumes that this has been vetted and my money's going to be well spent, and I don't think there's any kind of reporting where they have to show what their expenditures are, and I think I noticed in Jill's report that some states have a required reporting either to the state treasurer as to how the money was spent each year, and I would certainly like, if we're going to provide sort of a fundraising vehicle for organizations, that there be some accountability, that they have to report out how much money they received each year and how they spent it, and I could see them reporting that to the state treasurer. So if we could do something like that and insert it in this bill, I'd be happy, but I don't have any trouble at all with the firefighters. They've been doing this, and I probably don't have a big problem with this organization, but I don't think there's any accountability, and we haven't had, and I think we need to have some minimal amount of accountability when we allow people to do that. Thank you.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Make sure you all can hear me. I would make a substitute motion that the contents of Senate Bill 69 be placed inside along with the contents of Senate Bill 68, that the bills combined as Senate Bill 68 be recommended favorably for passage, and that they be placed on the consent calendar.
We can't place a amended bill on the consent.
Remove the consent calendar part.
Senator, is there a second? Seconded by Senator Pittman. Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, firefighters have a legitimate bill here, and it was for a $10. Anyway, I understand the chair's move to try to get an empty shell here with 69. I think that's more what this is all about. I think both these bills ought to, if they're going to move out, they ought to move out on their own basis and not together, but as individuals. So I'm not going to support this motion of combining them. It's for the, I don't know where 69 will end up and what it will become as an empty shell. But I do understand, you know, committees wanting to do that so they have a tool and something to use. But the firefighter bill, you know, for the firefighters, I think their bill ought to go out, and I do think it ought to be on the consent calendar. And I don't have a problem with putting the Chloe bill on there either. But I think they ought to be separate and go out of here separate, Mr. Chairman. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Senator Clays.
Just a reminder for the committee of the history of this bill. It did pass last year. It was passed out 38-0 by the Senate and went over to the House. There wasn't a single objection to it.
Committee, we're on the substitute motion to combine the bills. We've heard some good suggestions. What's your pleasure? All those in favor of the substitute motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion fails. We're back on the first motion to send the firefighters bill 68 out favorable as as amended. Do we want to place that on the consent calendar would be? Is that an amended motion?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to amend that motion that I made. Hopefully the second will agree that I'd like to add to that motion, my original motion, that we'd like to put it on the consent calendar.
Seconds agreed.
And I'll make note that this is not an additional plate, just for everybody's awareness.
Motion's been made. If I'm clear to pass 68 out, and because it's non-controversial nature, place it on the consent calendar. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, it's on its way. Now we'll turn our attention to Senate Bill 69. Adam, you want to give us an explanation on 69?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Senate Bill 69 would provide for a new license plate, the Love Chloe Foundation license plate. The plate would be subject to the minimum threshold requirements set forth in statute, the 500 commitment, and the up to $20,000 costs. The Love Chloe Foundation, with approval of the Division of Vehicles, would be able to assist with the design of the plate. Additionally, the Love Chloe Foundation would be able to set an annual royalty fee in the amount of $25 and up to $100. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Any questions for Adam on the plate? Seeing none, committee, what's your pleasure on this plate? Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion that SB 69 be passed out favorably and placed on the consent calendar.
Do we have a second? Second by Senator Pittman. Further discussion? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could I make a conceptual amendment that there be a yearly accounting of revenues and expenses reported to the state treasurer? That would take it off the consent calendar if we pass that.
Does the maker of the motion want to withdraw so we can continue discussion?
Then I'd like to make a substitute motion that we approve Senate Bill 69 with an amendment that requires a accounting of revenues and expenses on a yearly basis to the state treasurer.
It's the committee's, is there a second? Seeing none. Second on the substitute motion. Further discussion? Senator Pittman.
Mr. Chair, I don't agree with this motion. I want to second this. We have the active discussion on the point. I think that might be a very fine idea for all our plates, but I don't think it's fair to penalize this one plate in this one circumstance with that reporting requirement. I think that should be a well-thought process if we're going to put a reporting process in place for these plates. Great idea for visibility, great idea for our charitable funds, that are going out there and our constituents that are, but I don't think this is the place to do it on this particular bill.
Senator Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just have a question of the guy that made the motion, Senator Hawk. If this requirement is on any other fundraising license plates?
I don't. I do not, but I'm pretty sure it isn't.
Mr. Chairman, my suggestion would be that instead of supporting this motion, that the senator bring an amendment on the floor for full debate to the committee and maybe make it a broader amendment that would make an accounting for all fundraising plates. That would just be a suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Senator Hawk. What would the purpose be? I mean, if we get the information, what are we going to do with it? Do you want to do something with it or just collect it as a point of information?
I was not prepared. Actually, I think I agree with Senator Pyle, and I probably will vote against my motion. But well, I think it's important that the motion be there so that there's some history that, I think we do need some measure of accountability on this. And that would be a start, just that would keep the people who are using these license plates for fundraising so that it's more transparent, so that information is available. And if it turned out that something did not look right, we as legislators would have that as public documentation, and then we could come to this committee and either rescind the license plate or make stricter. And I don't disagree with Senator Pyle that it probably should be for more than just one, but I don't think we've really set an accountability, and I think we've been lucky that we haven't fallen into some kind of a situation that maybe wasn't something that we would actually feel good about. Now, so far, I think we have, but so.
Sounds like we need to have a bill introduction come up. Senator Dietrich.
So I do have a procedural question then. Do we really need a bill, or could we just make a request that we get this information from the agency as chair?
I think to make it broader to encompass all of them, we would probably have to have it done in statute.
I guess I was just thinking a piece of information that we could look at over all of these license plates. Do you need to do that in statute?
Any legislature can make that request from research. It might, how they respond, in statute would make it a lot easier to get your information, I'm sure, and then we would have a basis, but.
Just procedurally, just wondering what would be best. Thank you.
Senator Hawk.
Yeah, I think if people knew that was a requirement when they got their license plate, but I wouldn't see any way what's it going to be now, 44 or 45, if they don't collect that information, I don't know that they would feel compelled to give that unless there was either a requirement in our rules and regs on doing this or a requirement in statute, my thinking.
Vinnie, what's your pleasure on this motion or further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed? No. Motion failed. We're back on the original motion to send Bill 69 out, favorable for passage, and place it on the consent calendar. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Senator Hawk, do you want me to put you on the agenda for Tuesday's bill introductions?
I'd always love that. I don't know that I'll be ready, but I do think it probably needs a little more thought than what I gave it today, but I still think it's something.
I agree, and I think that's something we may need to, with bill introduction deadlines coming up, may need to see if we can get that placed in the exempt committee so we'll have time to work it. Senator Pyle.
I do think, I like the idea of having a bill, getting full hearings, and then all of those license plate people out there that are using it for fundraising have an opportunity then to know, hey, do I want to give a full accounting? Do I want to, and then come testify. I mean, it gives them at least that opportunity if they know about it. And maybe that's something that we could ask AMB or somebody to notify all of those groups that, hey, there's a bill, and you need to be aware of it. It'd be interesting to hear what they thought, what the thoughts are on that. Thanks.
Senator Hawk.
While I think it's a good idea, I agree with Senator Pyle. There might be some unintended consequences, or it may be burdensome on some of them who are very low-income charities, and they may feel like. And then I think we need to decide at what level of accounting do they need to do it. Does it need to be a CPA type of audit, or could it be a very simple, just income expense statement? So I think there's some interesting questions, and I'd sure like to see the people it affects have a chance to respond to that. Thank you.
Senator Clays.
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding most of these are 501c3 organizations, and 501c3s, their Their reporting on their 990s are all public information that you can look up online. I don't think it's onerous to have them provide that, but it's also public information already.
Senator Bowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other thing, if we don't want to, if this is just a research year, we could have an informational hearing and put them on alert that we're looking at this rather than a bill introduction, but an informational hearing. So just another avenue. Sounds like we need to do a lot of looking into this to see the unintended consequences, and maybe it's not a threatening procedure to folks. They'd be able to come in and give us their thoughts before we proceed.
I think last year's committee, the thought was we would have Jill do some research on requirements that other states had so we could actually look at a bill like this. I kind of expected one earlier, but we'll move forward and see where we go. With that, committee, we're out of here on the time that the president wants us. Oh, by the way, just for your information, the Senate President's Office has requested that we start wrapping up our meetings at 20 after and clear the room by 25 after. I don't think we've abused that any at all, but just give you a heads up as you're watching the clock. With that, we're adjourned.